Keval, wonderful to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
I'm going to start. I'm just kind of interested in your impressions and kind of takeaways from the last couple of days. All the content and all the conversations. What kind of jumps out at you, around, AI and generative AI in commerce after really kind of deep diving on this for a couple of days?
Absolutely. It was a fantastic last few days in a great location, a lot of cool events. Raj had mentioned that it's a conversation, not a conference, and I think that's carried along pretty well. We did these off sessions with a group of folks.
The houses
all
yesterday afternoon.
And it was great. The conversation swayed from how's the data maturity of my business looking, or what do I need to do to get to this next level of AI. Generative, obviously, being the buzzword of the year almost, right?
Sorry, what are we talking? Sorry, what was that? No.
That side, it's picked up, and I think people are realizing, like, look, I can do generative AI that's just going to allow me to make quick wins, right? Write some content, write some post, but there's a lot more to it. Like, I can really train my data, look at my historical data, and really apply proper machine learning AI to it, and those conversations were just fantastic.
Well, actually, it brings up a question. I mean, I know you at Codal have worked on like an AI maturity model, which I think is really interesting, and it's useful, I think, when you have discussions with businesses, like where are they, what should they be thinking about based on, where they're at on the curve and what have you. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's really interesting.
Absolutely. So over the last, I want to say 2 or 3 years, we've been working with a lot of e-com merchants, and they want to jump into machine learning, AI. And we started to build this maturity model where it goes 4 stages, really. And it starts at the early stage, just kind of exploration and adoption, where you're training the staff, training the team on how to just use AI tools. So ChatGPT, online kind of image generators, SEO generators. As they mature, we also want to kind of remind everyone that data is really important. You need proper pipelines and infrastructure. So the maturity model kind of scales from just kind of exploration to maturing the data, having proper pipelines, having proper infrastructure. And then it gets into
cleaning, normalizing, synthesizing data.
Yeah. How do you weight historical data, right? We know brands might have 50 years of data, but you can't really use something that happened in 99 to tell you how it's going to affect a buying journey tomorrow, right? So there's relevancy ratings and weighting on that. So as that side gets mature, we get into more maturity of AI, which is the automation. And can it make business decisions for me? Or can it just inform me, and then I still need a human to correlate that? So eventually the 4th level is automation, and organizations we've seen got to automation in certain areas, certain departments, and then still are pretty lightweight on the other departments. So kind of had a bunch of conversations with a lot of different executives around different industries in the houses yesterday. And it's very interesting to see where some are really mature on data, not really AI. Some are kind of starting on both journeys. A lot of good insights there.
Yeah. As you work with clients, how would you characterize like overall kind of maturity around these topics? Like, the state of their data, and obviously how far along they are in the journey. How would you sort of characterize that, to generalize, obviously?
Yeah. So we kind of look at, we do a high level framework to see, is there staff readiness to make this happen, right? In order to pipeline data correctly, we need the right folks on the engineering teams, the business sponsors. And then we look at technology readiness, right? Are they using utilities that allow us to extract data, utilities that allow us to look at data and transform it into a data warehouse or a data lake, and the kind of the infrastructure there. So based on that, then we kind of jump into understanding, what does that change management process look, right? A lot of times it's not just tech, there's a business understanding. Folks are maybe already used to doing something on intuition versus data, and that mindset takes a little bit of a journey to correct.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say it anecdotally, this is not generative AI, but really more kind of general. Way back in the day, as a merchant working in e-commerce, we, of course, were basically writing our own algorithms around things like product recommendations, right? And it was literally, I remember his name was Tim, and Tim had this huge, PC under his desk, right? And that's where that all lived,
Yep.
right? And we would literally like pat it on top sometimes. And so Tim was writing all of that, and it was interesting to then kind of go into the bake off. At that point in time, merchants were like, well, I am the expert. I am the one who knows how to put the assortment together and what goes with what, et cetera, et cetera. And like a lot of e-commerce businesses in the day, and this is, of course, right around probably the year 2000, right? I'm talking about here. One of the things we naturally thought was, well, a belt goes with a pair of pants, and then you put a shoes and this and that with it. This is an apparel business, right? And what we found is that was exactly wrong.
Yeah.
What the algorithm was telling us was, if they're shopping for jeans, show them other jeans.
Yeah.
If they're shopping for belts, show them more belts. And as merchants, it's kind of like, oh, we don't know anything about what's going on, right? Actually, if we're going to use data to drive optimization, right? Sometimes there's ahas. That might sound really like basic.
Yeah.
Obviously it was. But now we're in a situation where as more and more data can get marshaled, again, cleaned, normalized, made useful, and then applying AI and generative AI on top of it, it's interesting to see that transition that merchants and marketers need to make, right? To say, okay, you may not necessarily have all the answers, right? Your job is to actually know what questions to ask.
Absolutely. Right. And just that example of Tim, right? We've run into so many orgs that they don't even have that PC. Yeah. It's just in their head, right? They know that this month and I'm selling this because it's Black Friday is approaching and here's what people want. But
they don't actually know what they want.
Yeah. And once they look at the data, the experience, the interactions of the users, that whole changes, right? It could be they wanted something completely different because it's seasonality and weather and nothing to do with Black Friday. Right?
Well, just to extend the story a little bit, we were also doing a lot of user experience design and A/B testing, and this was early days of having usability labs in house and things like this. Like we were kind of pushing the envelope, and that team. I'm still in touch with a bunch of them. The Eddie Bauer team. Shout out to the OGs at EddieBauer.com many years ago. Phenomenal team we had put together, and we built this usability lab in house, and we were doing all this we were all discovering as an industry together how to build e-commerce sites that worked, right? And one of the things we realized, like, we had phenomenally talented designers who would come up with beautifully elegant, like, wonderful design, and then we'd put it in the usability lab and go, well, unfortunately, the one that we all liked is the worst performing. Yeah. And so we came up with like a line to sort of explain like things, and it sort of like ended up permeating our whole organization. It's like, we are not smarter than the customer.
That's where it starts, right? It's a common viewpoint when we start e-com builds that are brand new or even net new businesses, not even transformations. It's you have to build multiple variations, and then you have to start to look at what the traffic and the users are going to react on, and it's almost always one of those situations where it's not what the stakeholder operator was thinking that is.
And it's not that it was bad. Actually, the designs were beautiful.
Sure.
Or the merchants having this concept for how to build an outfit. Yeah, they're not wrong. It's just, they can be very, very thoughtful, and they are experts. However, it's not necessarily what the customer will respond best to. And so you just have to kind of approach it with that mindset. And now we're entering another phase of that, right? Where AI becomes an even more powerful tool in the toolbox, and merchants and marketers who are already, of course, data driven. I mean, that's essentially like at the core of digital commerce and digital marketing, but now starting to leverage these tools to expand the amount of experiments that they can be running, expand the content variations they can use to personalize with. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one more element, right? Instead of them kind of juggling, 50 different things a marketer or merchandiser has to do on a daily basis, they're consolidating, but then getting very informed reporting, right? Some of the tools that we were demoed and debuted yesterday around like Clarity, they can probably run a lot more segments, a lot more campaigns that could be targeted versus always kind of focusing on one wherever the time allows them to, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting time because I think, it's interesting for you to be, have developed this AI maturity curve that you already talked about, because I think we are still really early in the journey naturally. But then let's just like imagine, let's just say 5 years out ahead, um, which sounds like a long time unless you're as old as I am, and then it doesn't sound like a long time. It sounds like it'll be here tomorrow. Let's think 5 years ahead. Imagine what the types of clients that you work with today. What's a day in the life look like? How is AI, basically being used inside not only their organization but within the customer experience? What are some of the things you're thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as the kind of the universe of tech evolves, there's always new evolutionary fields that kind of come out of there, right? So I think we'll start to see some new fields around like ethical AI, QA testing of AI, right? Is it properly actually doing
what we want it to do?
What it to do? Is it analyzing and weighting the incorrect data, right?
Yeah.
So I think there'll be a large subset of kind of sub industries, let's say, or ancillary industries that come out of the AI ecosystem. And then I think naturally it'll start to fit into the hierarchy chart, right? So you may have, let's say, a set of team members maybe doing a lot of inventory forecasting and planning and billing engagements, and then writing up respective reports for the end customer. Instead of that, now they are monitoring. They're understanding that it's working correctly, right? They become guiders and coach of those respective utilities versus the doers, right? And I think that there'll be a kind of a evolutionary change of what an e-com stack or a MarTech stack looks like at an organization.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, another sort of question I think for you is just like, what do you imagine the kind of impact on the technology providers and services market with the advent of these tools? Obviously you're thinking about both of those things, right? Who you're partnering with, who you're building your practices around, and how your practice is evolving working with clients. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, all right, we've talked about the impact on your end clients and the merchants and marketers out there in the marketplace. But how do you think the tech and services community will be impacted?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's something we think about all the time, right? I think there's some long stretch fears. All right, AI is going to replace consultants, right? And I mean, maybe 40, 50 years down the road in a different cycle of maturity. But I think it's right now what we're seeing is demand of readiness and preparation, right? So how do data models need to look like? What, like, in order to get the most validation from AI, what do we need to do, right? And that process is kind of increasing the involvement of respective consulting firms to come in and say, I have all this data. What do I do with it? And how do I organize it? How do I classify it? What visualization tools can I build to be ready for further AI? So that's one end of it. The other end we're looking at is firms wanting to kind of co-partner to build upon some of these existing AI libraries and infrastructure. Right? There's a lot of innovation already out there, and now they're kind of moving to sub-industries. So how can I really mature my AI practice or vision plan for logistics management of my shipments, or post-order surveys to customer service that really didn't see much of a cost center, right? It's known as a cost center in most businesses. Is how can we kind of establish that better? So we've been seeing a lot of different verticals of demand that we haven't seen for innovation.
So one way to maybe play that back to you, and tell me if I've got it right. I think it's really interesting. Is that actually, the consultancies and the agencies of the world may actually need to sort of increase the aperture of services that you can get involved with to help support clients capitalizing on these opportunities versus a narrow niche that you specialize in?
Exactly. And it's starting to be interconnected, right? An interaction with the finance team may kind of change the buying journey on the front end side.
Right.
Until you have the right data stack, that's not traceable, right? The finance team isn't speaking with the data team, or the data team.
So it's like, we have an inventory issue or a supply chain issue or a margin or this or
quality,
that or this or that. And these are all inputs into how you want to steer the AI to drive the outcomes you're looking for, right, within the business, right? Which is, I think, a really interesting point.
Yeah. And it's the interconnected, right? As much as the departments are split and operating independently, this allows to have a central data store and then central initiatives to kind of figure out what is the next step of the journey.
Yeah. So I know you think really deeply about these topics and you're engaging with them every day. I'm kind of curious, as you go back to, the office, you get back to your, routines of how you engage with clients and your organization and so on. What would you say is sort of like an idea or a takeaway or something you'd either double down on that you already believed or something that maybe your mind changed as you think about this whole topic?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great topics and discussions from yesterday's houses. One of the big areas that we kind of looked at is the data element, right? Brands, all these SaaS companies out there, all focused on, we have this generative AI, we have this tool.
But it's isolated.
It's isolated.
Yeah.
How do we framework that out so we can start to feed proper data in a easy route, right?
Yeah.
So like our clients would probably use in a headless e-commerce ecosystem, probably using 10 to 20 different providers, data sets. How can we make it easy so there's a platform of data that's available for these respective AI tools as quickly as possible?
That's such a good point. And I've been talking with some folks about similar challenge. And there's data tools and there's ETL and there's CDP and there's these different things, but even there, kind of isolated scope of what those tools were sort of built to solve for. And now we're in this situation where you kind of need to be able to not only aggregate, normalize, clean the data, but then federate it to all these different systems.
A lot of
and if they're not operating on the same consistent data, then you're going to run into potential, conflict even.
Absolutely.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to see you again. And thank you for all the great thoughts and insights.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
absolutely. Happy to be here. Looking forward to the next one.
Wonderful.